I think buyers overlook their due diligence in looking for seller's credit. I think I always recommend to buyers and sometimes to sellers that you go in, have someone who really knows what they're doing, take a look and candidly assess what could be the problems there. I think it's more of an ounce of prevention type thing. And I think a lot of people don't do that. I think a lot of people don't read the agreements before they sign them, buyers and sellers, and they don't know what they mean. I had just had a matter the other day, and I'm like, this is an invalid arbitration clause. Do you know what that? Do you understand what that means? Not disclosing something. I can't emphasize enough how much you need to do that.
Every real estate deal looks clean until it isn't. One misdisclosure, one vague contract clause, one contractor agreement that goes sideways, and suddenly a dream transaction turns into a courtroom battle. Today, on the Real Estate Roundtable, we're pulling back the curtain on the legal landmines that buyers, sellers, agents, and homeowners walk past every single day, often without realizing it. My guest today has spent over 30 years inside those battles. She's tried more than 150 cases to verdict, holds the highest AV Permanent rating from Martindale Hubble, and leads a multi state trial firm with offices in Beverly Hills, the Bay Area, and New York. She's not here to scare you, she's here to protect you. If you've ever signed a contract without fully understanding it, renovated a home, or bought or sold real estate, this episode could save you thousands, maybe more. I'm joined by award winning civil trial lawyer Hillary Jones. Let's get into it. Welcome to the podcast, Hillary.
Thank you, Lancelot. Thank you for having me, and happy holidays to everyone.
This is going to air in February, so the holidays have passed at this point.
Okay, well,
But Hillary,
happy 2026. It's off to a good
yes.
start.
Hillary, before we dive into contracts and disclosures, I wanted to start with you. What originally pulled you into trial law and what kept you there for more than 3 decades?
I watched a lot of Perry Mason reruns when I was a kid, and I was trying to figure out how I could make a good living as an adult. Even as a kid, I was thinking about it. I was at side hustles, and I wanted something interesting. I heard all these things, and I'd go into offices and see stuff, and they looked like they had boring jobs. And I was born in 1968, so women weren't allowed to do that much then. They didn't have career. Most women did not have careers. And I looked around and I wanted something that was interesting and changed a lot and I could actually do something. And I did. And I wanted to be in control of my life. And I liked Perry Mason. I liked Della Street. I liked that a woman was there. I liked that he got to call a lot of the shots and he got to make a lot of the decisions. And I liked that in the 60s he was charging $100,000 retainer. I like that. And that he was really in the system doing things for people. There was an actual real outcome that affected a real person as opposed or a company as opposed to I just stamped and completed these papers and it moves on. And I thought it was interesting, so I delved into it and I looked at several areas of the law and I debated it for a long time. And I wanted to be a trial lawyer. And when I became a lawyer, I got sworn in. I didn't really know if I was going to actually, I'm like, oh God, what if I don't like it when I actually get there? But I did. I loved it. I really liked it. I liked doing those things. It wasn't always fun. I'm not going to say it's always fun because it's not. But ultimately, at the end of the day, that's really what I wanted to do. And it's
And what was your first real aha moment in the courtroom?
my first aha moment in court was I had a contempt hearing when I was a new lawyer. It was a mini trial because some guy said he didn't get served. It was a funny little thing. And I remember I was there taking testimony and the judge took my side because the guy was really rude and didn't like that. And I was a new associate, so I didn't really say anything because I was always worried about getting fired. You always hear these nightmare stories, and it was in a quasi-recession. And I'm like, I'm actually trying a case. This is good. There are ways to get a judge on your side appropriately. And I just barreled through. We won, and I barreled through and those kinds of things. And I think I asked him a question. I remember he said it wasn't him, it was his twin brother. I said, your twin brother, huh? And he said, yeah. And I said, why isn't he here? And everybody just sat there and the case was over. Everybody knew it was over, and I liked it. I liked that there are those aha things, and I liked cross, and I decided I was, yes, I'm good at it, or people think I am. And so those are the skill sets I have and the personality I have really well suited to it. And I know I'm like, okay, I'm going to be able to do this. And that was maybe 6 months into practicing or something like that.
That is so cool. I always thought of myself that I would probably be a good cross examiner, but it's from watching all the shows. When did you realize real estate disputes were a recurring theme in your cases?
Because they came up all the time. And people fight over things, and you have to figure out what person's needs are. And we all need land. We all need a place. We all need a place to sit. We all need a place to live. And people will fight. People like to make money, and they're the same. A lot of similar dynamics in everyday life, but ultimately, where you live, how you live, and things like that really determine your future. And I liked the idea. It was a continuing thing. It's not going to exhaust itself. There's always going to be real estate. There's always going to be disputes. There are, at least in the foreseeable future. I can't. AI may change a lot, but it's not going to change land. It's not going to take the place of a contractor. Maybe some of the architects at some point, but I liked those. And there's several different aspects to real estate too. There's the disclosures, there's the construction, there's the habitability, there's external factors such as fires and floods and things like that. But ultimately, you're dealing with people. And I liked that. I wasn't interested in working for faceless corporations. I wanted to work for a lot of companies because we do work for them. We represent a lot of companies, but ultimately we're dealing with people who are making decisions about how they're going to affect things. And so I liked that aspect of it. So there's everything from leases to restraining orders to zoning issues to construction defect or what this is going to mean or how a disclosure has affected a person or a crazy neighbor. There's a lot of aspects that go into it. And it's always changing. There's everything to learn, but land may change, but everybody needs land. And I thought it was a stable, and it's also interesting. I do think it's interesting. I don't think a lot of real estate attorneys are interesting, but there are a few. But I liked that aspect of it. And a lot of business deals and other deals involve that anyway. They do. So I liked that integral part of it.
Was there a case early on that shaped how you practice law today?
Yeah, I had a couple tough cases when I was a new lawyer, wealthy people, high stakes. One involved a developer. We won them. And I think they were both tough cases. We had a difficult client in both of them. There were a lot of evidence issues. And I really had to dig in. And I remember thinking, if this is and one we actually did lose, which I don't lose very often, and I hated it, but it was how it went. But there were so many aspects of it. But these were really, really tough cases. Like a lot of attorneys won't take them. A lot of attorneys take cases. They're like, that's really difficult or that could be a problem. And I'm not talking about assessing the merits of a case or something like that. But I'm like, I need to be able to work through these messes and I need to be able to do this. And, what you'd expect in big cases where before they had everything digitized, where there's huge boxes of documents and you have to look through them and figure out what it is and how the evidence is going to be presented. And you back your truck up to the courthouse with all the documents and clients going off the rails and things like that and calls at midnight and people meeting you in the parking lot. I remember one time I had a client come up to me in the parking lot and I'm like, oh dear, this might be a problem. All those things that you hear about really are true. And so it was a test for me and I think I passed. But I remember thinking I didn't want to handle just small trials. I wanted big high stakes cases too. And our firm does take on, this is not a tennis pitch. There are several firms in town that do it in LA and Bay Area, New York, but we're a small firm, but we take on big law. And you need to be able to do this if you're really going to push that. Otherwise, you're one of many who just has limited skill sets and things like that. Yeah, those really did shape me. They were rough. I'm not going to lie to you. They were tough. They were not, nothing ever went easy in those cases. But
I don't think any transaction is the same too in real estate. As a realtor, I can tell you that every transaction is unique and it has its own hurdles.
yeah,
Pretty much.
but
And you get some easy ones that like from start to close, 2 weeks cash deal, no inspection, nothing. Just okay, I'm buying that house. Those are like the breath of fresh air in the middle of a chaotic environment.
yeah, yeah, they are. And when I was younger, and I still do, I want to take on the hard cases. I don't want everything easy. I don't. Nothing's ever.
That's how it would keeps us still functioning properly. The tougher ones because
I Yeah,
about your profession and what you need to do to make it happen,
right.
or in your case, to win the lawsuit or
Yeah.
whatever it is.
But
Um,
in life too, if you have everything easy, it doesn't. You're not helping yourself. You're
yeah.
not. If everything's easy, there's a price you pay for that. And you can draw on those experiences. Go, okay, I've dealt with this before. This is what you're going to need to do, and things like that. No, I don't want everything extremely difficult all the time, but that sometimes that's how it goes. Sometimes there are months and months, and even a few years where you're just dealing with really tough cases, and that's what you have to do. If you're not willing to do that, you're really limiting yourself as a lawyer. And it's okay. There's work for lawyers who don't want to do that too, but that's what I wanted to do. I wanted
From your experience, what legal protections do buyers and sellers most often overlook in a real estate transaction?
I think one, there's a right to cancel. I think a lot of people overlook that. I think they overlook their due diligence. I think buyers overlook their due diligence in looking for seller's credit. I think I always recommend to buyers and sometimes the sellers that you go in, have someone who really knows what they're doing, take a look and candidly assess what could be the problems there. I think it's more of an ounce of prevention type thing. And I think a lot of people don't do that. I think a lot of people don't read the agreements before they sign them, buyers and sellers, and they don't know what they mean. I had just had a matter the other day, and I'm like, this is an invalid arbitration clause. Do you know what that? Do you understand what that means? Not disclosing something. I can't emphasize enough how much you need to do that. If you have a crazy neighbor or one who's threatening to sue, that's going to reduce the value of your property. It just is. I don't know why it took so long for people to realize this. Having a crazy neighbor is, people are going to pass. They are. Having a property in litigation, doing some due diligence. And I think people get caught in this thing. I just want to sell it. I just want to sell it. I just want to buy it. This is our dream home. And I think people get very attached emotionally to the idea of a residence when there are, I can guarantee you for every dream home you have, there are several others out there that you'd be just as happy in. So you need to do your due diligence. But I think traditionally it was, you had a certain point in your life, you're supposed to get married, have kids, do this. And if you hadn't done them by then, so I think a lot of people really do see buying a home as a rite of passage, what it is an investment. And I think people also mistakenly believe that a home is a major retirement asset, and that's not always the case anymore. So I think people really need to evaluate whether they're doing it for the right reason. Look, I'm not going to lie to you. A lot of people make a lot of money in real estate, but it's not the norm. It's not. It really isn't. After capital gains and what you put in and what you paid, because including interest on a mortgage, unless you're paying cash, a lot of people aren't making that much. Some are. There's the people who traditionally bought in the 60s and 70s. They have that all over LA and throughout Southern California and other areas. And now it's worth a lot more money. Of course it is. That's a different matter. But if you're expecting to become rich from that, I think a lot of people expecting to become rich from residential real estate investments. The flipping was big for a while. They had those flip shows. And now you notice they're not doing it anymore because people are really, those flips are really money pits. And they're fraught with potential legal issues. And so
Hmm.
I think people really need to understand that buying a piece of property is an investment and you need to treat it like that. And the emotional attachment that you have to it, having your family and things like that, your family who you live with or your pets or whatever it is, that's what you made. It doesn't really matter where you are. Yeah.
That's spoken there. What contract language raises red flags for you immediately?
An arbitration clause, I think anything with an indemnity provision concerns me because those are, or sellers waiving something, or what buyers waiving something, or you freely admit that you're going to, any kind of waiver, which there shouldn't be in an agreement anyways. I don't think you really could put one in. It doesn't concern me. I always look for a mediation clause. I tend to have this. California is the CAR, where you say you have to go to mediation before to be eligible for legal fees. I think that's a good policy. I put them in a lot of my other agreements because a lot of these things can be worked out before litigation, even ones I thought would not get worked out. And that's a good step. I think attorney's fees provision, anything that puts in like a liquidated damages clause, anything about keeping deposits. I'm very careful about language that says you've had a reasonable opportunity to disclose, things like that, because people don't read these. And what I look at is, I had one where it was an attorney's fees provision, but it was mushed together with two other paragraphs. So it's like I was looking for it, and I had to do a word search because I couldn't find it, and I found it. Things like that. You need to be very clear to these people what they're agreeing to. But those are some addenda. I look at them if there's any other issues there. A seller's credit, for example, I want to know exactly what that seller's credit for, because this happens a lot. They go, "We already did this." I'm like, "You got a seller's credit for it, so you knew about it, did you?" I didn't think it was for that. Were you clear to the buyer? I get this all the time because the language isn't clear, and you have a couple words in there that maybe. And again, I am friends with some brokers who are excellent. If I need anything, I would absolutely call them. They know about more of that stuff than I do. But a lot of them don't just put in that extra language, that extra thing, because they really want to make the sale. I'm like, or I get the ones where, oh, the broker told me, or they told me this. I'm like, it's not in the contract. It's not part of the deal.
Got you.
Those kinds of things are what I
Can you
look.
elaborate a little bit about what an arbitration is and some of those fancy law terms you said?
Sure. Okay. An arbitration is a mini trial, except it's rent a judge, essentially. They used to call it rent a judge. It's private judging. An arbitrator is a person who's vested with the authority to be a decision maker in your matter. So in this day and age, for example, the Bay Area isn't as much. New York is not as much. LA County right now, and everybody knows it. Like I had a matter in Ventura County a while back, a couple weeks ago, and the judge said, "Is this in LA County?" Okay, it's going to be a while. And I'm not dissing LA because I live in LA and I love LA. I really do. It's a great city, a great county with a lot of cities. And I'm so glad to be a Los Angeles resident. And I mean that. But it takes a long time to get to trial. So a lot of people go to arbitration, and there's a few reasons for that. One, it's not public. It's a lot of the pleadings and all those things aren't going to be made public, so people don't get embarrassed. Two, you can call them. You can get a hearing real fast. The arbitrator will email you. And with some downsides. One, an arbitrator's ruling, unlike a court's ruling, can be appealed much more easily for abuse of discretion, mistake of law. An arbitrator, unless they essentially take sides, it's very difficult. I tell them this. It's very difficult to set aside an arbitration award. It's much more difficult to do. In addition, a cheap arbitrator is $400 an hour. A lot of these people charge a couple thousand an hour. So you're paying your lawyer even just $400 an hour, let's say, times 8 hours. That's $3,200 a day. In a week, you're up to $16,000. So you're paying $16,000 a week in addition to what you're paying your lawyer, plus the prep time, plus the administrative time. It's a lot more efficient. They're a little more lenient with things like that. But arbitration is essentially a mini trial where you're vesting the authority instead of a court in an arbitrator to make the decision in your case. Mediation is a means of alternative dispute resolution where you say, look, you're having a dispute. Let's go to someone who's trained. There are several of them to go to them and have them mediate. Usually these are done by Zoom. Traditionally, everybody used to get in the same room, which I thought was a bad idea because having sometimes people in the same office or anything when they're fighting is not healthy. I never thought it was a good idea. So I'm glad that they do a lot of this by Zoom. People can Zoom in via breakout rooms and the mediator goes back and forth and tries to settle it. And these people are trained. Some of them are very good. And granted, I tell my clients, it's their job to settle this. It's voluntary. They can't order you to do anything. They're not going to report you to the judge. It's nothing like that. And a lot of times these things can settle. And sometimes it is good to have someone who has experience in that area, who is very knowledgeable, someone who does not have a vested interest in the case at all, other than trying to settle it. Give them their input. So it can be a very useful tool. So maybe that helps.
Yeah, that does help. Where do consumers and even agents assume they're protected when they're not?
When consumers, you mean buyers?
Yes,
Okay.
buyers or sellers.
I think buyers assume that if they talked about something, that it's in the agreement, and it's not. I hear this a lot of insurance too. We do insurance, we assist with insurance here too. And they go, the broker told me this. I go, was it in your agreement? And if it's not a deal. Okay, I think people properly assume that. If they think a contractor, they say they didn't say there was anything wrong with the property, so it's fine. No, not necessarily. Did you do some due diligence? Maybe they didn't know. Maybe they're hiding it from you. And I tell them, look, an ounce of prevention. I unfortunately have had some clients, it's very sad, where there probably were disclosure issues. But what it's going to cost to litigate is a huge investment too, and there's no guarantee of an outcome. But I see them walking into that. I also see, you saw it more 15, 20 years ago. People had to buy a house. They had to buy a house. They were going to get priced out of the market. They were never going to be able to do it. And this sort of panic that set in. You see this periodically in market trends. And I think people need to know now that there's going to be other opportunities, almost always. Maybe not this particular piece of property, but I've seen it happen several times where people buy properties that maybe weren't well advised, maybe for monetary reasons, for needs a lot of fixing with a neighborhood, a neighbor, whatever it is, because they get so emotionally attached to the idea of getting the house. Because a lot of people, and including myself, I used to be like that too. Conditions say, "I've got to get a house. I've got to do this. I've not. I've just," and I think people fall into that trap very often. Agents need to watch what they say. I represented agents and brokers in litigation. I can tell you the main thing is they need to be very clear. Look, I can show you the property. I have not inspected the property. I'm not a contractor. You need to understand these things. You're encouraged to do your own due diligence. We're not doing that for you. Get title insurance. Title insurance may not be enough because it may not tell you there's been litigation pending against this property for some time because someone forgot to record a lis pendens, something like that. I think agents and brokers, the ones I know, are very careful about what they, not just what they say, but what they say and what they don't say and what they make clear they don't know. And I think it's very difficult. One of the things they first teach you as a lawyer, which I think is good advice, say, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. That's not my area. I can't tell you how this is going to go. People call me constantly, I'm going to win my case, right? And I go, I don't know. I can't guarantee a win. I'm not the decision maker here. There's a lot of things that go into it. Different judge, different jury, different day, different result. And I think agents and brokers need to be a little. So I've seen some that are very fast and loose, and they will disappear once there's a dispute because they usually all work for companies, and they're going to sit there and they're going to say, "Hey, Adam, we don't want us getting sued," and they don't want to lose their job either or their income. So they're going to sit there and say, "I'm sure they have some sort of insurance," but I think they need to be careful what they say. I really do say, "Look, there's this and this," and if they ask, "Are there any problems with the home?" None that I know of, but I would really encourage you to do your due diligence. Send an email and say you'd asked me about this. I only have the listing. I only have this information available. I have not had a contractor go in to view this property. I really encourage you to do that. Little things like that can make a huge difference. And they say later, you told me it was fine. You told me it was a great neighborhood, or there were good schools, and there was a shooting over there. You need to be careful about that. There's what they call puffery, like traditionally was used car salesmen, right? That was what they did. Mm-hmm. They talked up a car. But you need to be careful about these because what if you have a bad at home, or there's termites, or there's mold, or there's a crazy neighbor, or there's fighting over this and things like that. You need to be very clear what the buyer's responsibility is because most of it's on the buyer and seller. It really is.
Gotcha. So many disputes seems avoidable if people just knew what to look for in early stages of
I think
a deal.
Yeah, I agree with that, Lancelot. I really do. And again, most people don't know. If I weren't a real estate attorney, I wouldn't know. Maybe I Google or AI it. There's no assurance that would be true. And by the way, if you're looking on AI and Google, make sure you check your source documents because they're not always accurate. Everyone there.
Disclosures are one of the most misunderstood parts of a real estate. What do buyers and sellers consistently get wrong?
I think they consistently get wrong that they need to have a contractor go through. And if I were selling a property, I would have a contractor go through and say, there anything that could potentially be a problem here. This hasn't looked, this hasn't looked. For example, when's the last time you had someone go and look at your pipes? And you disclose it. Say, look, I have never inspected the pipes. I don't know what kind of shape they're in. What about the electrical wiring if you have an older home built in the 70s? There are rules about these things. It's what is the foundation like? What is the neighborhood like? I think sellers need to do a little more and the buyers need to do a little more. But what I repeatedly see is, oh, they said it was fine. They didn't tell me anything was wrong with it. Okay. But if you have any questions, ask them now because it's a lot harder to do afterwards. Why are you selling? Did you have any issues when you're here? Did you have any weird neighbors? Did you think no known issues with neighbors is a big one? And I will tell you, this happens a lot. And I've had situations where neighbors have pulled guns on each other. Expensive areas in LA that I'm talking, places you would not think these would happen. So I would really make sure. You have to think of the nightmare possibilities and make sure they don't happen. And you can't always guarantee it. What if you have some, but you need to do what you make sure you can do on those things. What's the street noise like that? What's the parking like? Or is there that neighbor that comes out all the time and moves your trash bins? What are these things like? You need to look around. If you can, ask the other neighbors or say, could we walk around your neighborhood at a certain time a couple times to see? There's no law against it. Just Those are the kinds of things you need to. And as a seller, you need to know what's going on with your property. Maybe you're unaware that there was a problem with the roof. Maybe you really didn't know. It's, oh God, I didn't know the roof needed to be replaced. Shoot, I had no idea. I thought it was fine. Maybe things like that too. Have you checked your warranty on the appliances that are coming with the property? I don't know. You need to do those things. And if you don't, and if there's a foundational problem, you need to check and make sure these are all still in good shape, because you're going to be held responsible for it if you didn't check. If you sell a property with a foundational problem and it turns out later, you're responsible. You are.
Yeah, once it's an as is contract and it closes, it's the next person's responsibility.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah, it is.
That's why I like to recommend, not everybody takes me up on these recommendations, but a pre sale inspection by an inspector to come in and look around and make sure that everything's good, nice and dandy. You get the report and look, this will cost you right now maybe $2,000 to fix it. That's whatever it is, whatever the issues are. But if we get into a contract, it might cost you a lot more to fix these things, because after that contract goes in and they're requesting everybody to be no handyman basically. Everybody has to be licensed. So if you take out a DSCI outlet, you need a licensed electrician. You as a homeowner can do for $15 or $18, and then to do that outlet change, they're talking about $150, $200 for one outlet change. And now you have three or four of those. You're looking at an insane amount of money. Every single little thing that needs to be repaired and fixed or changed out because new codes are in. So it's something that I like to always mention to my clients is, look, let's do a pre-list inspection because it's worth it.
Yeah, it is. And I'd also advise them to look at ADUs, add-ons, remodels. Were they done correctly? By a licensed contractor? Is there a permit?
You guys have a lot more of those in your area, LA, and
We're getting a lot of those. Yeah. Yeah.
yes, it's a new thing. It's a new trend to have another home on your
Everybody
lot.
thinks they're going to make a lot of money with the rentals, and there's limits to what you can do now, and they've limited those. And a lot of these contractors aren't licensed, or they're not doing it right. And guess who's going to be left responsible for that?
The homeowner.
It's gonna be the homeowner. Yeah, it may not be your dream come true. You may not be able to use it. There may be other issues, and because you're essentially building an ADU, may seem like an add-on, but the inlet unit, it has to be done right. And I see some of them are done right. I see some of them done horribly wrong.
So, in what disclosure mistakes most often lead to litigation? What
Disclosure
disclosure?
mistakes, I think failing to disclose any kind of defects with the property, like mold, termites, a boundary issue, or an issue with a neighbor. That's more what I'm seeing. That they get in there and the plumbing doesn't work, or there's an electrical problem. Fundamentals are usually what I see.
Okay, and how does under disclosing expose sellers to risk even years later?
If they find it's not, it's when they discover it. So if the buyer finds out 4 or 5 years later, yeah, these pipes have been leaking for years, and the reason you have mold is because you had leaky pipes, and the seller, there's no way the seller didn't know this because it's coming in through here. That kind of thing. That's what's going to happen. So if the seller doesn't disclose, and a lot of people don't, they just want to sell the property and they figure we'll hope for the best, but they can come back years later. I will say, if years and years go on, it makes it much more difficult to sue. But usually these problems are readily apparent or become apparent afterwards. And we've had cases like that where they're after the statute of limitations, but it's from the date of discovery. When should you have known or reasonably should have known? And if someone say, come on, you've been living on the property for 5 or 6 years, you never noticed? Those kinds of things. There's an electrical problem now. Why do you think it's caused when the seller lived there? What is your proof that they knew about this? And they say, well, they had the electrical replaced and it was by an unlicensed contractor. Maybe you have something there, maybe, but backtracking and proving the source of it over a period of time. You have flooding. You've had several storms in your area. There's an atmospheric river. There's a flash flood, whatever it is. That doesn't mean a tree fell. There's been lots of other issues in this neighborhood. It doesn't mean that. But I will say the longer you wait, the more likely it's okay. You're coming back to that now. You know that's it. You're providing an easy defense for them.
Got you. Homeowners hire contractors every day. What legal steps should be taken before signing a contractor agreement?
Know your rights. I would check and make sure that the contractor has a license. You can CSLB.org. Make sure that they're licensed contractors. Make sure they have insurance. They show proof of insurance, and that they name you as an insured. So if you have to make any claims, I would also make clear from them what the progress is going to be. And I believe I have to check. I think it's Business and Professions Code 7159. A lot of these people pay a lot of money up front. They're not required to in certain situations. There's a dispute about whether it applies to ADUs, but a lot of these people pay a lot of money up front. The contractor gives them the, they're not supposed to do that. It's usually like $1,000 or so. And the reason is to protect consumers. So you don't pay a ton of money up front, and then the person takes off with your money and uses it for another project because they've over budgeted whatever they're doing. Then you're really, I get a lot of calls like this. It's like, they're out of business now. I think they moved on to another project because what they'll do is they'll take the money from that project and use it for another one and say, oh, we have to buy materials. Okay, fine. What are the materials? Send me the bill for the materials. Or let me come with you. I'll pay for the materials as you incur them. I need to know what they are. And I think a lot of consumers don't know that they're not required to. And I've seen there are exemptions now to ADUs, but it is inclusive too. So I think those are some of the main ones. An arbitration, do they understand what that means? Do they want to go to arbitration? Maybe they want to sue in the civil courts. An arbitration is a lot. An arbitration, to me, in a lot of cases, sometimes it makes sense, but it shouldn't be what everybody is using. I think you should use the courts because it's a lot more expensive to use arbitration and you have limited rights of appeal. So you're increasing your cost and you're limiting yourself in that regard. And that can be difficult, and people don't always understand it till later. What they're doing. They're giving up the right to a jury trial. Any valid arbitration clause has to say that. And if it doesn't, it's not valid. So a lot of people don't realize I don't get my day in court now. And it's not just about your day in court, but what you're paying for it. It is true, and say, for example, the Bay Area is pretty far ahead of LA in that regards because of the backup here in LA, particularly after the fires and all these other things, and we have so many cities. But the time is a consideration too. We have to tell them it could take you 2 or 3 years to get to trial. Now, are you okay with that?
And in the contracting side of things, what clauses matter the most in protecting homeowners?
I would say make sure that for the contractor to protect the homeowner or protect the contractor.
This is for the homeowners to be protected against the contractor if it's a bad player. What would be a good clause for them to have inside there? So we're talking to sellers and buyers and people that are doing renovations on their homes and they're hiring a contractor. What clause should be in that contract for them to be protected?
Attorney's fees provision, prevailing party attorney's fees provision, a mediation that qualifies so you can qualify for attorney's fees. I would also have an indemnity provision. Any corrective work caused by them is going to be paid for by the contractor. I would check the bond on the contractor, and I would also make sure that the contractor names each owner and the property is insured and shows proof of insurance regularly. Because sometimes they'll get insurance and then they'll cancel it. Make sure it's accurate. That they do. They do.
And what warning signs suggest a contractor may not be reputable?
If they can't work with your architect, if you have one, if they're not licensed, if they can't tell you what subs they're going to be using so you can do your due diligence, if they are not going to be on site, if they're hustling, just we need to get paid, and there's our payment schedule, and it's a rush to get paid. Someone who's rushing to get paid, it's not always a bad thing. Sometimes people just don't handle it. It may be the particular day. It doesn't necessarily mean there's a problem, but it can be a red flag. I would say you would want to see some of their other projects, and if they can't show you those, or if they've had a lot of litigation, or if they've had CSLB suspensions, those are things you can check out online. Complaints, those are listed, those kinds of things. If you're seeing a lot of those, I had a client who goes, this contractor's had several complaints with the CSLB and a couple of reprimands. I'm like, it's your decision whether you want to use them. It sounds like there were some issues. Whether or not they were well-founded, I don't know. But the CSLB thought so. So again, those kinds of things are red flags. If you get a funny feeling about someone, like they're not being straight with you, maybe think twice. Sometimes when you're talking to someone, they're not telling anything wrong, or if they're too smooth, sometimes that's a problem. They can all be things. That's more the trial lawyer in me. But
If a contractor breaches the agreement, what resources does a homeowner actually have?
they can sue them for breach of contract. They can report them to the Contractor State Licensing Board. They can sue them for negligence, other things like that. They can also, those are your recourses. You can negotiate with them, but ultimately, you can also make a claim on the bond. But bonds aren't usually very much. They're usually like $15,000 to $25,000 in the state of California. So if they made $150,000 mistake and you file $15,000, $20,000, $5,000 for corrective work, you may get something. But I think those are your choices, and that's why I really would urge buyers to be very careful when they buy, when they have work done, to know to manage it as it goes. Because if you don't, it becomes a bigger problem. If you just sit there, they should know what they're doing, but this seems wrong. Call an attorney, call someone who's knowledgeable in these areas. Then they may be able to advise you. What are you seeing that's concerning to you? What is the problem? Are there delays? Are people not showing up when they said they would? That's a big one. People just aren't on site for weeks on end. I can't get a hold of him or her. Usually him, but sometimes her. Those are signs. The crew wasn't here. I don't think these are licensed subcontractors. They wouldn't tell me who they were. Are they licensed? Those are things you need to watch out for. And if you're seeing
Gotcha.
these red flags, call an attorney. Get a consult. Pay them for their time.
And how do poor contracts impact resale value and future transactions?
If there's defective work done, you have to disclose it. So if there was corrective work done, say we had the walls redone and we had some of the flooring put in and it was done incorrectly, so we had to come back in and there was a lawsuit. You have to disclose that when you sell the property. And they may say, I'm not willing to pay that price anymore. I want $40,000 less. It may or may not, but you have to disclose it. Remember that. If you have problems with your contractor and there's litigation or disputes or corrective work, you have to disclose it to the next buyer. So they may say, I want a reduced price, and I wouldn't have bid that if I had known that there were problems with the stairs or the wall, or the walls were improperly wired electric. You had to redo it, and what does that mean now, and how long has this been, and those kinds of things. Is it under warranty, which it almost always is, and the warranties are pretty ineffective, frankly.
You're licensed across multiple states and federal courts. What should clients understand about how legal standards differ from state to state?
Different state, different rules. California and New York are very similar in certain respects, but for example, one of the things is when you purchase a property in New York, both sides need to have an attorney. That's not required in California. The brokers and the agents usually fill that role. I think that the burdens of proof can be different. The availability of contractors, like in California, they make it very consumer friendly. I'm not saying other states aren't friendly, but it's more difficult to file a complaint, for example, in DC or Montana with the contractor state licensing board. There's a lot of bureaucracy involved. It's not always as efficient. People express frustration. But it used to be you could take things as is, which they don't allow anymore. But I think they need to be aware of the rules in their particular area and the variances. For example, California, a lot of its height. People don't want their views blocked. Those kinds of things, or they don't want certain land developed, but they'll allow to develop out in the areas. I think you need to be more aware of those. HOAs, by the way, play a major role now. There are attorneys who just devote their time to doing HOAs, HOA law, because there's
HOAs are a headache sometimes. Even here, as a person that lives in an HOA, I'm telling you, like, it's crazy what kind of liens they can take away your home for not paying your dues.
yeah,
Like,
they can foreclose
for
on
$200, they could. I'm taking away your $450,000 home.
they can
because
foreclose on you. They can,
$200.
yeah. And a lot of people don't know that because they have a dispute with an HOA and they go, I'm not going to pay my fees. I'm like, they're going to foreclose. And I've had that happen in litigation where a person was current on their mortgage, but not current on their HOA dues. And there was a default. And like recorded it and you knew, yeah, but I didn't think it was right to pay it. Pay them and get it back, deal with it later. That's the kind of thing. So HOAs are another different animal there, but they're very active now. Again, I know lawyers, that's all they do is HOA law because we get calls like that all the time. I have an issue with my HOA. There's the board, there's this, there's the bylaws, the CC&Rs. And you're also dealing with personalities because when you live in an HOA, you own your home, but you're subject to other people's rules
Correct.
in a small community. And so people give up certain things when they go into those HOAs.
It's just ridiculous how much power they have.
It is, but that's personality. I'm in an HOA too. I get it, but one of my properties is, and they're pretty hands off. But I'm not there much, so they don't bother me. But
My HOA is really nice too. It's not the people on the board that live in the community because I know them. They're decent people. It's the management company that manages the HOA stuff that does a little bit above and beyond that. I think that what happened to me last year, just an instance, I did not forget to pay my HOAs. I paid it. I showed them a statement. They were super snappy and quick to send me a letter that a list fence is going to be put on my property. We pay quarterly here, okay? And we missed one payment. I showed them the statements that I did not miss the payments. They still required me to pay that and the fees for the attorneys and the extra stuff. And when I showed them the statement, because I couldn't log in to pay anything until I paid all the fines.
They do that, yeah.
And then I showed them the statement, and I haven't heard from them. So it's like they're really fast to put you.
They're
in a
really
legal
fast
bind.
when that's very typical of a lot of people. They're
But
very
the other
fast
way
when
around,
they're
it doesn't work. You
no,
know, I'm
it's
like,
true.
so where's my money? You guys charged me for something that I was not supposed to be charged for. I have proof that I paid my dues. It went to your account. You guys lost it. That's not on me. That's on you. It went to your account. Your accountant or whoever made it disappear. And now I'm in the hole by $500-600.
Exactly, and you're also describing as property management, which is a whole nother animal too. So you've got
Yeah.
in a lot of these things, you have property management and you have the lawyers, but the property management HOAs are also their own separate entities, which are run
Yeah.
by which which the owners are responsible for, but they are also operate as their separate entities, and that can add another layer to it. And I would check out the HOA and things like that. By the way, everyone.
Oh, for sure. If you're a buyer, you got to check out the HOA. Talk to the president of the board, see how they are and what their enforcement level is. You know, 'cause some
Exactly.
HOAs are like, you can't have your trash bin out in the front of your house, and I'm like, so I have to keep it in my garage? Yeah. So you keep all the smelly, stinky trash bins in your garage, and I'm like, that's not right. What's the difference if I put it out or if I put it in? Can't have bicycles out in front. Some HOAs, you're gonna trim your bushes a certain way, and they're really adamant that they're gonna fine you if you don't. And
Yeah.
you're like, really?
No, I know. I hear what you're saying. I do. I've seen
Yeah.
these. Yeah.
And the problem in Florida is that soon you won't be able to find a house without an HOA.
Yeah, that's coming
Every
a lot of areas. HOAs are very common now. They're really common in
Yeah,
Southern
every
California.
developer that's developing new land with new housing has an HOA now. So they don't even develop land without an HOA
Yeah,
anymore,
that's
which
true.
which is a little bit uncomforting because you're going to be like, what if I don't want to live in one, but I have to build myself a unique home for $6, $7, $800,000. I can't afford to buy a 350 anymore because all of those homes are in these HOAs.
HOAs where you don't want to live and you're subject
Exactly.
to very random people and things like that.
Yeah. It's good that we're having this conversation added in here. Where do federal regulations override state law?
Things about environmental cleanup. If there are restricted uses of land, the feds don't usually interfere with the state, but for example, if it adjoins a national forest or it's by the ocean or things like that, there are federal rules. The states are always subject to the federal rules. So any legal, but I would say mostly environmental, some zoning, they're set out for them. If the feds, usually what the feds do is they leave it to the states, particularly to the cities. So you've got the federal level, then the state level, then you've got the city ordinances, the local ordinances in a particular area that you have to contend with. But those are primarily the state and the federal government have the power of eminent domain. They can always take your property. So if a natural resource was found there or they deemed it necessary for something, there's always that risk.
But you have to get a fair value for your property.
What is fair value? If you're building an airport, you're likely not going to, if they deem it necessary for military purposes, I don't know that you're going to do very well there.
Well, what I heard, most of the time they compensate you fairly. It is what it is. They have plenty of.
Usually. And people like to think their property is more valuable than it is sometimes. So there's that.
Yeah, but that's a misconception from the property owner, not market value.
And I'm not suggesting that the feds are not fair in their compensation.
Yeah.
I've certainly heard of it happening, but by and large, I have not heard that it's one-sided or anything like that.
As being in the game as a realtor and selling homes for next to 10 years now or 11 years, I dealt with plenty of sellers that think that their property is worth a lot more than property value. Like the market value.
Or buyers. They're like, oh, I'm going to buy this and it's going to be, no, it's really not. Yeah. I know.
So what legal trends are you watching that could impact real estate professionals?
I am seeing disclosures for one, the role of HOAs, and I'm also watching development trends where properties are being developed and I watch more how people live because that's going to affect the trends as much as anything and where people are living and things like that. And recycled homes, I'm looking at those too because a lot of people are losing jobs to AI and things like that and they're moving and how that's going to look. And I also look at the environmental impact. I think this is the generation you're going to see a lot more of that, or in ways that, look, we've been affecting the environment for 200, or at least 200 years, but you're going to see a lot more of it affecting us now, which it didn't before. So those are issues I look at in the
And
trend.
how can agents stay ahead of compliance instead of reacting after problems are risen?
I think doing your due diligence and learning on your own. I think learning about what you're responsible for. There are a lot of classes you can attend online, articles you can read that are free. And so you have a clear understanding of what your responsibilities are and the rules and regulations. And I think you also need to know that it expands on beyond the rules and regulations. And sometimes people are like, this is the rule, right? So we did this. Okay, we're fine. It doesn't always work that way. And I think, and that real estate needs and people change often. So you're going to have that. And I think you need to decide what you can live with and what you can't.
For sure. Now, rapid fire protection round.
Okay.
Fast, punchy, and memorable. So, one contract clause you never ignore.
Liquidated damages clause.
Okay. One disclosure sellers underestimate.
Issues with neighbors.
One reason deals end up in court.
Failure to disclose.
One thing every agent should tell their client before signing.
I have not done my own due diligence and I'm not a licensed contractor and I haven't inspected the property. I'd urge you to do so before you buy.
I love that line. One legal myth you wish would disappear.
If you buy real estate, you'll get rich.
I love that. Oh,
It's
final
sometimes true.
takeaway?
It's not always,
Yeah.
though.
Yeah. If there's one piece of advice you want every buyer, seller, and homeowner listening to walk away with today, what is it?
Do your due diligence and know what you're getting into. Okay, you really don't take my word for it. Don't take your. I always tell my clients, do you want to learn how to do this? Here's what you can look at. Make sure you do that.
Yeah, due diligence is vital. Thank you very much, Hillary, for today.
Thank you.
Today's
Lancelot.
episode is a reminder that the most expensive mistakes in real estate rarely come from the market, they come from the paperwork. Huge thank you to Hillary Jones for sharing decades of courtroom wisdom and practical protection strategies that every homeowner and agent needs to hear. If you found value in this conversation, do 3 things for me. Subscribe to Real Estate Roundtable, leave us a review, and share this episode with someone who's buying, selling, or renovating a home right now. You can find Hillary and her work at Hillary Trial Lawyers and connect with her on LinkedIn. I'm Lancelot Lenard, and until next time, protect the deal before you protect the price. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Sir Lancelot's Real Estate Roundtable, where we've unveiled the mysteries of real estate together. Remember, in this kingdom of possibilities, every dream home is just a discussion away. I can help your real estate dreams come true. Just call me at 786-449-7518. Until our next roundtable, may your ventures be prosperous and your homes be filled with love and joy. Farewell, fellow knights of real estate.